Hello. So today I want to look at how to include values from higher time frames on your charts. I have an example here showing where I have a 5-minute chart open, but I'm showing a moving average from the 1-hour chart. And as you would expect, that moving average from the 1-hour chart is stepped because it only changes every 6 bars from the 5-minute chart. And then as we reach the end of each hour, it steps down, in this case, to the next value. So I want to show how to do that. I've also got a second example that I'll show you, and this is a channel. It's an ATR channel based around a moving average. So the moving average here is from the 5-minute chart, but the ATR distance is based on the ATR from the 1-hour chart. So a slightly different issue, and it doesn't have this stepped approach because the moving average, the central line, is smooth because it is based on the 5-minute chart. But the gap to the ATR doesn't change until every 6 bars are finished. So let's step to the code and have a look at how we do this. Now here I have the moving average indicator already written. There are some issues that you're going to face when you're looking at a higher time frame. I'll first go through the basic indicator and then I'll look at how to address those problems. So starting with the basic indicator, it's an indicator in the chart window using this hash property indicator chart window. The number of buffers is 1. I'm just showing one line for a moving average through the screen. I'm just making that a color yellow green, and I've made it width 4 so it's nice and easy to see in the video. There are 3 typical inputs for a moving average. That's the moving average period, the method, and the applied price. And I'm using these enums, MA method and enum applied price, they're built-in enums, for the method and applied price, because then when you see the input screen for the indicator, they appear as drop-downs, and it's nice and easy to select what you want from them. I'm defaulting the period to 24. And that's because I have this other input time frame. This is the higher time frame where I want to grab the moving average values. I'm defaulting this to a 1-hour period. And because it's a 1-hour period, I thought it was convenient to make the default moving average period 24 because that's conveniently a day. Because I have only one buffer, I've declared this double buffer MA. That's going to hold the values for the moving average. In the init section, I have a test. This is the input time frame and this is the current chart period. And I want to make sure that the input time frame is a higher or equal time frame to the current chart period. So I just have this test. If that's less than the current chart period, then I'm just going to print an error message and I'll return this init parameter is incorrect, which will terminate the indicator immediately. That's the only test I have. And after that, I need to assign the buffers to an index. So I'm using the set index buffer statement, assigning the buffer MA to index number 0. And then I just return init succeeded. In the body of the calculation, first I need to know how many bars to calculate. Each time you come into this function, and this is an event handler function, rates total includes the total number of bars or rates available to you. Prev calculated includes the value that was returned from this function last time, and that's down at the bottom here where we typically return rates total. And that tells me how many bars I have already calculated. So what I want to do here is only calculate changes. So I'm just calculating this value of limit, which is equal to rates total minus prev calculated. But then the last bar needs to be recalculated each time, or the last bar that I calculated, simply because it was probably still open and active. And the next time I come through, the values for that bar may have changed. So I say if prev calculated is greater than 0, which means this is not my first time through, I'm just increasing limit by 1 with this limit plus plus. That forces that last bar that I had to be recalculated again. And then this is a fairly standard loop. For int I equals limit minus 1, so total number of bars that I want to calculate minus 1, because the index into the array is 0 based. As long as I is greater than or equal to 0, so I'm counting down to the 0 bar and using I minus minus to decrement I as I go through. Now I need to know where to get the values from the higher time frame. I can't just use I as my bar number. So I'm declaring an integer called mtf bar, and I'm using the iBar shift function to find the appropriate bar number on the higher time frame. And the arguments to the iBar shift are symbol, which is the same as my current chart symbol, the higher time frame, and in my example I'm using 1 hour, the time that I'm looking for, and I'm getting this from the current chart, so this time array is passed into the onCalculate function, and it includes the start times of all of the bars on the current chart, my 5-minute chart in this example. So I'm passing in the 5-minute chart time, and a value of false here says that I'm not looking for an exact match in this higher time frame. I'm looking for where that time would fall. So it will search for the time that I'm passing in and give me the appropriate bar number from the higher time frame that includes that time. And then when I calculate the value for buffer MA for bar number I actually want to get the value from the higher time frame. So that's as simple as calling the IMA function, passing in the symbol and the higher time frame value for period. And then these are just the moving average inputs, the period, shift, which I typically make 0, method, applied price. But instead of saying I want the moving average for bar number I want it for this MTF bar. And then that populates the moving average buffer for me. And then I simply return rates total, which means the next time I come into this function, rates total that I returned here will come in as prev calculated, and that way I don't recalculate everything each time. That's all I need to do in the simple case. There are 2 problems. Now I'm going to show you those now, and then I'll come back and show how we can fix those. Now here's the chart, looking very much as it did at the beginning. There are 2 problems with this. The first one might not be immediately obvious, but if it happens while I'm talking to you, I'll explain it. This is the moving average for the current 1 hour, which is changing as the price moves. And if I look closely, I can just show that the end of that bar is moving. But this entire line should move because the moving average for that whole 1 hour has changed. But because the calculations are only performing on the latest bar, remember that limit calculation, all I'm moving is the very tail end of this bar. So the first problem I need to solve is that every time there's a change in the moving average for this entire segment, I need to recalculate and reposition all of that segment. The second problem is a little less obvious. Metatrader doesn't by default download values for charts that are not shown. I don't have a 1 hour chart open here, but I have been using the 1 hour prices, so they're in memory and they're stored in the history files. But if those prices were not there, I would not be able to get a moving average calculation on the 1 hour chart. And I can simulate that by going to the history, deleting the history file. So if I look at File, Open Data Folder, History, MetaQuotes Demo, then I can see here I have a Euro USD 60 file. That's the history file for euros. I won't delete that just now because when I do close Metatrader, and I'll have to close Metatrader for this to show, it will rewrite that file. So what I'll do is remove the indicator from the chart so there's nothing calling the data, close Metatrader, delete this file, restart Metatrader, and then show you the indicator again. Now back with Metatrader open, I have deleted the history file and I'm now going to add this MTF moving average back to the chart. Inputs are all the same. I no longer have the jagged line, instead I've got this single vertical line. It's probably dropping down to 0 because there is no history there. So those are the 2 problems to solve. The first one is addressing this lack of history. And if I simply update this again, you can see that everything's come back because Metatrader has called on the 1 hour to get values. They weren't there initially, but now they are, and I'm getting an indicator. But you don't want to do that. I would like this to show up initially. And the second problem, of course, making sure this entire part of the bar moves. Now, to solve the first problem, I'm going to insert a piece of code here that will check to see if those prices are available and loop around if they're not. Remember, I was able to go into the indicator a second time and all the data came back. So here's my piece of code. I'm declaring a static integer type called wait count because just in case something's gone horribly wrong, I don't want to be caught in an infinite loop. So I'm going to try this 10 times. I have a test here that says if prev calculated equals 0. That means this is the first time I've been in here or something significant has happened that has caused prev calculated to be reset to 0. Those significant events don't happen very often. Typically, this is just on the first time through. So if this is the first time through, I may not have any of the higher time frame data. As long as the wait count is greater than 0, I'm going to be decrementing this if we have failures, then I'm declaring a date time type, and I'm using the iTime function to get the time for bar number 0 from the higher time frame. If that fails because the data is not available, it will return an error. So I'm capturing the error here, var equals get last error. The problem with the error coming back is that for this particular error, if I get it twice, I still only get the error number returned once. So if I call on iTime to get these values back, I'll get an error. If I call iTime a second time, and even if the values are still not there, I won't get an error the second time. So I'm capturing the error because you may want to use that to identify what's happening. But I'm really relying on the value of t coming back. And that t is going to be 0 if I can't get iTime from the bar number 0 on the higher time frame. So if t is coming back as 0, then I'm decrementing the wait count. I'm printing a message that says waiting for data. And then I'm simply returning prev calculated, which is 0 because we've come in here. And that means that the next time I come into this loop, because typically when you return from these, you return rates total. Every time you come back into onCalculate, rates total has been moved to prev calculated, or the value you returned last time has been moved to prev calculated. So by returning that, or returning 0 here, it's going to come back in here next time with that already set to 0, which will cause me to go back into this loop. And because this wait count is a static variable, it started at 10 when it was initialized, but the next time through the loop it will be down to 9 because I decremented it here. So this is my way of ensuring I don't get an infinite loop. So I return 0, which causes the next tick to come along and go back through the same logic. If t does not come back as 0, that means I've got data, and I simply then print a message that says data is now available. And in future, prev calculator won't be 0, so I won't be wasting time in here. I'll just go straight through. If wait count has already decremented as far as 0, so I've used all of my 10 attempts, then I'm just going to print a message that says can't wait any longer. I've never actually seen that message come up, but I'm sure that it might happen one day if I have something like an internet outage. And of course then the indicator won't show, but at least there'll be a message to show why. And then this goes through and the rest of this logic is the same. So that's the first problem resolved. For the second, I'm going to adjust this line. So instead of simply increasing limit by 1, if prev calculated is greater than 0, I'm going to increase it enough to include all of the bars for the current higher time frame. So here's my revised logic. I'm still testing if prev calculated is greater than 0, which means that I've already been through this loop at least once. And now I'm simply saying if the limit is less than an integer value of the higher time frame divided by the current period. So this gives me a nice multiplier. If I'm using a 5-minute chart here and the input time frame is 1 hour, this will return 6. So this is a very convenient way of knowing how many bars I need to recalculate. So if limit is less than that, which means that I'm toward the end of the chart, then I'm just saying that limit is equal to that division, higher time frame divided by the current period. And then just in case I don't have very many bars, I don't want to exceed the size of the data available. So there's a quick check on the array size of time. If limit is greater than that, then I'm resetting limit to be the size of time. Now, that will mean that if I'm 3 bars into the current hour on a 5-minute time frame chart, this will also recalculate the last 3 bars on the previous hour, but the value of those won't change. The moving average will keep coming back. It's a little bit of wasted effort, but I find this is a simple and workable solution to make sure that I recalculate everything for the current hour. And those are the 2 adjustments I need to make. Firstly, waiting for data to become available. And secondly, recalculating all of the bars on my small time frame chart that will have changed as a result of the higher time frame. Now, firstly, the movement in the end of the chart here, I can't really show you that that's not happening because it's not happening. You'll just have to trust me that that's working. But I will simulate the lack of data again by going back into the data folder and restarting this. So I've removed the indicator from the chart. I've deleted the history for 60 minutes. And now I've got Metatrader open again, and I'm showing the Experts tab in the terminal window here because that's where the messages will show up. Now if I just add the MTF moving average, you can see the first message that it's been loaded successfully. Okay, initialized, then I get the waiting for data message, and data is now available. So obviously on the first time through there was no data, but on the second tick data is available, and I can see that I have the nice jagged line as I expected. So let's address those two problems. So now let's look at the ATR channel. For this example, I'm defining the ATR channel as being centered around a moving average, and the moving average is coming from the small time frame chart. So it's telling me roughly where the current price is and where it's moving. But then the upper and lower boundaries of that channel are based on an ATR distance away from that central line, and the ATR is calculated from the higher time frame, a 1 hour chart for my example here. That could be quite relevant because knowing where the moving average is now on the 5-minute chart, if you're trading the 5-minute chart, is useful. But the ATR for 5 minutes is quite small. And if you're planning to hold a position for more than just another 5 minutes, it's good to know how far it's likely to move in an hour. And that's why you might want to use a chart like this. So there are very few changes from the moving average higher time frame. First, I need 3 buffers because I have the middle line and the upper and lower boundary. Then I have 2 additional lines to define here. So I've still got the color 1, yellow, green, and the width 1 is 4. And I'm making these width 4 just because they show up well on the video. You probably want to make them a bit narrower for real life. I'm making the upper and lower boundaries, color 2 and color 3, blue. And I'm also making those width 4. The inputs have changed slightly. My higher time frame is still going to be 1 hour by default. But I now need to know an ATR period, and I'm just defaulting that to 10. So this will be a 10 period ATR on the 1 hour chart. Moving average period, I've still set it 24, although I'm now calculating it as 24 periods on the 5-minute chart. And of course the method and the applied price are still here. 2 additional buffers to hold the high and the low. This test is the same. If the input time frame is less than period, then I'm going to raise an error and terminate. I just need to do 2 additional set index buffers for index number 1 and index number 2. In the on calculate section, I still have this test to make sure that I have enough data to run the indicator. And I'm still updating my limit to cope with the number of bars required for the higher time frame. Now, this looks a little different to the moving average. It doesn't have the stepped approach, simply because the moving average central line of the channel moves constantly as the 5-minute changes. But the distance between that and the upper and lower boundaries remains fixed for 6 bars because it's the same as the higher time frame. So I still want to recalculate this indicator for the last 6 bars, simply to make sure that I'm keeping that distance away from the central line. And then the changes here are also very small. I still need the bar number from the higher time frame, and that's the same calculation, I bar shift symbol, higher time frame, current time frame, time I, and false. The moving average buffer though, instead of passing in the higher time frame here, I'm passing in the current time frame from the chart, and the rest of these arguments are the same, but the bar number I'm passing here is I. But then I'm going to calculate an ATR value using the internal ATR calculation. And this is as the previous moving average for the stepped moving average was. I'm passing the input time frame, the ATR period, and this MTF bar that's been calculated above. After that, the only thing left to do is to add and subtract that ATR value from the moving average central line and put that into the high and low buffers. It's as simple as that. Let me compile that. We'll go back to the chart and the ATR channel, a 1 hour time frame, 10 period ATR, 24 period on the 5-minute chart that I'm displaying, moving average. And there's the central line and the ATR. And you can see down here, it was initialized and went straight to data is now available. And that's because I already have the data loaded because I have the moving average line here. So Metatrader is already loading the 1 hour data for me. So I don't go through that waiting for data stage when I loaded this indicator on this chart. And that's all I have for you today. A fairly simple approach to getting higher time frame data. Just remember the 2 key steps. Make sure you have data available with this block of code, which is simply going to test whether I can get the time value back from bar number 0 in the higher time frame. And then adjust the number of bars you're calculating to make sure that you're calculating at least as many as are needed to make up the higher time frame. I hope this has been useful to you. If it has, please click the like button. The more likes we get, the easier it is for us to put out the videos. And if you want to see more of these videos, then click subscribe. And if you click the bell icon, then you'll be notified when we do release the next video. So until the next time, thank you for watching.